Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this special town council meeting for October 21st. We have all people in the chamber, and the mayor will join us online for this one. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered today in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Today we gather with the intent followed by the living in peace and friendship treaties with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Council, you have an agenda in front of you. What's your wish?
Deputy Mayor, I'd move that the agenda is approved as submitted.
Yeah. Seconded by. What's your wish? All in favor?
Aye.
Good to see. I hadn't seen Richard there. Welcome, Richard. We have 3 items on the agenda today. First item is a couple of reports, and the first one is the easement valuation report by Turner Drake, CL. Do you want to preface that?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So I just wanted to note that the town has now received our valuation reports in a preliminary PDF copy. They will be arriving in hard copy next week, and at that time we will be distributing them directly to the property owners. Nigel is going to present on the valuation process this morning, but the reports themselves and the valuation amounts remain between us and the property owners for the time being. So I just wanted to note that for everyone watching, how we're covering this morning. And thanks very much, Nigel, for joining us. You're welcome to take it away.
Great, thanks so much. Hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, thanks, Dylan. My name is Nigel Turner. I'm with Turner Drake, and I'm the VP there at Turner Drake, VP of the Valuation Division, and I've been with the firm for 20 years. We're based in Halifax. Just a bit of background, and I thought I'd just walk through the typical process that's involved with these type of reports, and then if you have any questions at the end. So we were hired by the town of Mahone Bay to complete valuation reports. It's really for the easement value, and that will be for the corridor that runs from Faubourg Road, and it will run down to the new solar garden. And so I should preface that while we're hired by the town of Mahone Bay, certainly the reports themselves and our opinion of value is purely based on our opinion, and is really an unbiased opinion. So this easement, just a little description of it. It's essentially a long and narrow corridor. As I said, it runs from Faubourg Road. It will be in an easterly direction towards the new solar garden. And really it starts at Faubourg Road and it goes across the RPS Composites property. It will go across the existing gravel road that heads in there. And then from there it heads easterly, and it kind of skirts the existing northern edge of a large wetland area. And there's a total of 4 parcels that were included in the easements, and essentially it's 4 separate landowners or 4 PIDs that seem to be that seem to be impacted, or it's crossing the easement itself. So in saying that, there was really 4 separate. I think Dylan alluded to the reports themselves, and we've now produced those. There's 4 separate what we call master valuation report. So the master valuation report would be the highest level of report that we would offer. It's most comprehensive. It's an open and transparent report. It goes through there and it explains what we did, the process, and how we arrived at our value. And for this, as I said, there's 4 separate master valuation reports. And really the purpose of the report was to determine the value of the market value of the easement itself. So we're not dealing with fee simple interest here. We're dealing with a partial interest or an easement interest for each of the parcels. And I should say that the reports themselves, on our recommendation, and it's something that we would recommend for a property of this type, would be our master valuation report that would be prepared for what's known as the Expropriation Act, or in accordance with the Act. And really the reason for doing that, for having a report that's prepared, to that high level of standard, would really be twofold. The first would really be, it really acts not only to not only does it value the easement itself, but it also contemplates the impact that the easement might have on the remaining property. And really what we're trying to do here is we're really trying to mimic the market. You know, a property owner would not sell a partial interest or a fee simple interest in a property without contemplating the impact that that might have on the rest of the property, and they would price it accordingly. And so that's the first point. The second point would really be, you know, in the event the town can't negotiate a purchase with the property owners in terms of the easement, those reports that we have are court-ready documents, and they could be used if it goes down further for an expropriation for the easement itself. Just a little background on it. We were provided by the town with the easement wording itself, and then a plan showing a finalized plan, which shows the easement itself running from Faubourg Road to easterly direction. And the survey plan for the easement really shows individually the easement parcels. As I said, there's 4 separate parcels, 4 PIDs that are impacted, and that crosses their properties. And so this plan gave us what we needed in terms of gave us the dimensions, the size, and the location for each parcel. A letter was provided to the property owners that I was CC'd onto as far as giving my contact information, and certainly we encourage them to reach out and contact me. I think that was sent out, I think it was back in August, Dylan, I might be wrong on that, but I think it was sent out in August. I did not hear from property owners at that point, and so I requested the property owners' phone numbers, which I was given, and then made contact with all 4 property owners. And really the purpose of making contact with each property owner, there was really, it was really to get an understanding of the use of their property and any plans that they have for it. The topography and tree coverage is pretty apparent from the aerial photographs and satellite imagery that we have. And I can see 2 of the parcels from the ground, from the adjacent the town lands and from Faubourg Road, but there's 2 towards the center and interior that you couldn't see. So really talking to the owners really gives us really more of a comfort level in terms of the topography and tree coverage for the parcels. And really the third purpose really would be just the impact, or just to talk to them about any impact they could foresee, something maybe I haven't thought of in terms of the use of the property and maybe the easement might have for the remaining property. So as I said, I was able to make contact with 4 property owners. I had a great discussion, I think, with each one of them, and have a fairly good understanding, I think, in terms of the use of the property now and what they had planned to use it for in the future. I thought I would just run through the report itself, what they usually involve. Really split into 2 sections. The first half of the report is known as our factual section of the report, and that really lays out and really describes and paints a picture in terms of the property itself, where it sits within the what we would call the parent parcel. So whenever an acquisition or a partial interest or a piece of a property is taken or looking to be acquired or purchased, the remaining property is often referred to as the parent property. So you'll hear me say parent property a number of times. And so the first section of the report really lays out the actual property itself. The parent parcel describes the parent parcel, the size, location, and then it goes further and it also describes the easement itself, the purpose of the easement, where the easement is located within the parent parcel, the existing zoning, dimensions, size, and really physical features of the property itself. And a little bit of history on the property, what its current use is, and ultimately the highest and best use, or what we think the highest and best use of the property is. And then the second part of the report lays out, really it's the meat of the report, and really sets out the methodology for valuing the property and how we arrived at the value. I should preface that all 4 parcels here kind of paint a picture that as we know, they're all located towards, well, one is located towards the rear of the property. The other 3 are more towards the centralized portion. But really, in saying that, it's really on the north side of the existing wetlands. So it's really, I guess, the best way to describe it would be to the very rear, for the most part, very rear of the dryland portion for each of these parcels. And one of them, in fact, comes at the very, very rear of theirs and just crosses the southern edge of it. The parent properties, as I said earlier, the parent properties, that they're really used for a number of purposes, but generally they are improved with homes, residential homes, but they're located well north of any of these easements. I think the closest one is say 350 meters. And as you probably hopefully have known, you walk up that street there, Faubourg Road. There's quite a medium slope up there, and then it gently tapers off towards the rear. So the homes are I shouldn't say well sheltered, but the homes themselves are located over the hill and then down and then concentrated along Main Street. The RPS site being the only different one from those, and that has direct frontage to Faubourg Road along its western boundary. And that's really being used for storage purposes and for access for the main site to the front. So in going through this exercise, we determined that the highest and best use for the property itself and ultimately the easement lands to the rear would really be for use in conjunction with the parent parcels. So that would be for residential, access residential, recreational lands, and for industrial purposes. And that really sets a direction in terms of valuing it. And since properties in the open market, you can imagine long corridor lands, easement lands, I should say, are rarely offered on the open market and rarely sell by themselves. And so an accepted method in terms of determining value, what we often do is look for sales of comparable parent parcels or larger parcels of land that have sold. And we break those down on a per square foot or per acre basis. And in this case, the parent parcels are quite large. And so, if you're dealing with 6 to 20 plus acres, you're really looking for medium to larger size parcels in smaller towns that have sold that are similar to the subject properties. And that's what we've done here. And so really what you do is you break those ones down as far as the sales, you break them down on a unitized basis, in this case on a per acre basis, and then you would apply that value to the easement lands. So in our reports, we have a number of land sales that we felt were the best indication of value, and they're included in the reports themselves. And obviously, as everybody knows, prices have increased over the years. So we've gone through and we've increased the sales, noting that in the report. And so the valuation report itself, with an effective date of say October 2022. Even if a sale occurred a year ago or a year and a half ago, those sales are brought forward for time and that's adjusted for. And really in this case, the adjusted sales all fell within, a pretty close knit or pretty narrow range. So I was quite happy with the sales themselves. The value of the easement lands, in this case, we went towards the high end of the sales. And so really what we're dealing with the easement value. And so we're not dealing with a fee simple straight out purchase value. And so with an easement value, whenever we're dealing with the easement value, typically it will be on say 50, it's usually on a 50% figure. Where does that come from? Well, it's just a generally accepted notion that easements themselves, say a power easement or an access easement or right of way, it's just an industry standard. It's just accepted to be 50%. And so what we did here was we established a baseline value, and then we applied a 50% value, 50% figure to that to account for the easement value, because the easement value is a partial interest in it. The property owner still retains ownership of it. You're just acquiring a partial interest in it. And then we apply that to each parcel. The second part, and that was really the baseline value. The second part of the report deals with really the various heads of claim within the Expropriation Act, and that sets that out in the act. And it's a very comprehensive act in terms of what we should look at in terms of providing compensation for the owners. And so a few key points in this one. Really, at the end of the day, after speaking to the owners, having a look at where the route is and the easements, it was our opinion that there was really no what we would call injurious affection or impact to the remaining parcel. And really coming to that conclusion, it was our opinion of that for a number of reasons. In comparison to the parent parcel, the easement itself is quite small. You're talking about half an acre. I think the smallest one is a third of an acre, half an acre. The largest one is say just over 2 and a bit acres. But the parent parcels are quite large. You're dealing with 12 acres up to I think 25 or 30 acres. I think it one's up to 50 acres. So in comparison, it's quite small and has little impact in terms of taking or acquiring a piece of the property. The second part, I alluded to that earlier, was the easements, the lands themselves and location, and they're really located well south of any of the homes. I've been involved in expropriations for a number of years now, and whenever I get involved in these, that's the number one question is, where are the homes located, and does it impact that? You can imagine a road or highway or something going next to somebody's home, not the case here, and of course that might impact it. So for here, you're well south of it. The easement lands are well south of any homes, and the homes themselves, as I said, are up over the hill and then down towards Main Street. So the third part of that was really controlled access. And it's my understanding that the town is installing, I think there's already an existing gate on Faubourg Road, but they're installing a gate for access, and that will limit access or anybody to go into that easement. And I guess the other part to that is one of the properties itself was to the very near. I think it was one of the interior properties. It was very rear of the property itself. And when you get the reports themselves, if you have a look at that, you will see one of the properties to the very rear of the interior one. It just slightly skirts the back of the property itself. And for the other ones, and for all of these properties, it's really on the very edge of the wetland area. So what do I mean by that? I mean, the land to the rear of that, it really has a recreational type use, but it's quite limited in terms of its use itself with the wetlands as it backs onto the rail line corridor and the trail back there. So you really have a limited use behind the property to the south of it. In addition to that, the owners are allowed to cross the easement themselves, across and over the easement, so it doesn't impact them in terms of access to it. So having regard really to all those points, it was really our opinion that the partial taken for the easement would not cause any loss in value to the remaining land beyond the market value of the easement itself. So in other words, there's no measurable impact in terms of loss in value to the remaining property. Our conclusions, methodology, and analysis is all laid out in the reports. It's a comprehensive, transparent report. So provided that to Dylan, and hopefully her copies will be couriered and sent down. And really that's it. That's an overview of the process itself. I didn't get into each individual report. I'll leave that to you for another time, but the reports themselves, yeah, that's just an overview of the reports themselves, methodology, and how we went through the whole process.
Thank you, Nigel. We appreciate the report, and you running through it made me understand a few things that I didn't. Council, any questions for Nigel?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm interested to know whether the property owners had input into the injurious affection section of the evaluation.
Yes, they did. So as part of any process, whenever we do a mass valuation report to expropriation purposes, it's paramount that I talk to the owners, and the town was great in providing me with that information. So yes, that was the purpose of making contact with each property owner, and I did that. And so we ran through really the current use of the property, any concerns they might have for future use of the property. And that was all contemplated by me in the report, and it was and it's all laid out there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one, if you don't mind. In my understanding, you basically mentioned that we are going with the easement value, which is 50% of purchase value. In just thinking about it, in many ways, we will be putting restrictions on how that piece of land, the easement, is used in some way, shape, or form. So in as much as we're not buying it, we're still introducing restrictions in what can go there and what can be done with that property. And so my question was around from your experience and what you've done in the past, would using purchase value be allowable from a professional perspective in certain cases where there's contention and things like that?
Yeah, exactly. Certainly, when my role in these types of reports and getting involved typically is the same process you followed here, and I determine my value. But in doing that, I've laid out the fee simple or the value outright of that parcel itself. So certainly, throughout negotiations with the town, if the property owner, feels that you know, although I'm giving away a partial interest, to me, I'm just more interested in selling the whole piece. That certainly is something that's entertained. Oftentimes, if there's a road, for example, which is not the case here, but if there's a road, for example, that goes through a piece of property, and that will be, they're not allowed to cross it to get to the rear of the property. Again, not the case here, but oftentimes they will say, well, there's a little piece to the rear of that. I can't access it anymore. It would be to my interest if you bought that piece as well. Again, I don't see the process here, but it's really flexible in terms of negotiating with the property owner, and any points they might bring up in terms of if they felt that they lost use of that property, and is not worth doing an easement, then certainly an outright purchase is something I've seen in the past from existing clients and past clients. Yes.
Thank you.
Just if I may just follow up on that, Nigel, I understand that at some point there was a, if not an offer, at least a suggestion of doing exactly that, of offering to buy everything from the right of way back to the rail trail. Is that still an option potentially as you negotiate with these owners? Some of them.
I'm not sure. My role is purely to determine the value of the easement itself. Yes, I was involved earlier, and Dylan could probably speak to that. Where those values to the south of that was laid out, and I think that was something that the town had pursued as one of the options, I believe.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll comment further. So yes, we did actually do more than a year ago now valuation report, which provided the property owners with 3 options at that time. It was valuation of the parcel itself as an easement or as a purchase, and then also the remaining parcel of wetland, if it would be separated in the event that it was a purchase, that could also potentially be purchased by the town, presumably with some conservation use in mind. So we didn't receive any response. These were sent out, I believe, in August 2021, I think over a year ago. We didn't receive any response from the property owners to those proposals, except that it was expressed by several that there was a preference for an easement. So the second time around, the easement was the focus, but it remains our option in negotiation to consider those different scenarios at the request of property owners. So if they say, I've changed my mind, I actually would prefer one of those options, that's still on the table with the town. And I would say that, you know, we have the valuations that were prepared last year and, you know, are reasonably still in the ballpark for those purposes in negotiation. And I should clarify as well that from here, the negotiation is between the town and the property owners. So Nigel has done his independent work, and then that gives us the information to base those negotiations on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Nigel, thanks very much for the package this morning. I'm wondering if you could just take a few minutes and kind of while we're in the public record, talk a little bit about your company's kind of reputation in the market as kind of industry leading opinions on this type of work, and as well as the documents you're preparing, as you mentioned earlier in the deck, could be used in further adjudication. Could you just kind of speak briefly to how well those documents have historically stood up in that kind of process if we needed to avail of the act further?
Yeah, so as a firm, we've been in business for 40 plus years. We're based in Halifax, but we have satellite offices in St. John's, in Moncton, St. John, Charlottetown, and while we operate mainly out of here, we do have those satellite offices, and we also have one in Toronto. And yeah, our expertise would be, I wouldn't say off-ball assignments, but I'd say, to me, more interesting assignments as opposed to the mundane appraisals that you would typically see. So yeah, I have extensive experience with expropriation and working within the Act. In a typical year, I would say last year would not be atypical, but it would be, yeah, but probably a normalized year, and it will be, you know, 10 in the realm of 10 to 15 reports a year that I would produce. That will be, you know, somewhat similar to this. I would say more severe is subjective, I suppose, but I've been involved with lots of properties where it was a small easement to the rear, similar to these ones, Other ones where they were taking the person's home as far as putting a road or a bridge across, or doing a realignment for roundabouts. Everybody loves roundabouts, so there's lots of work for that. So yeah, we get involved in all of those, and so typically we would follow the same process that we've done here. So yeah, so in a typical year, that will be in the range, the number we would produce. I would say as far as going to court and to actually proceeding that way for expropriations, it's very rare. I would say I like to think it's the fact that the property owners would be included in the process. They felt like they were listened to, and perhaps the negotiations beyond what I do is helpful to resolve everything. But yeah, as far as going that route into court, it's often quite expensive, long, drawn out process, and so that also plays into it. From my very high level looking at this, it's obviously people's properties, so people are emotional about it. It's an important piece of their property if they worked hard for it. I totally understand, but it is to the very rear of these properties, and in some cases the middle, but it's on the very edge of a wetland area. And so to me, from the outset looking at these, I couldn't see anything glaring to me that would say this is a really tough assignment in terms of injurious affection. But I'd like to speak to the owners and find out, maybe I've missed something and maybe I don't understand the use of the property. So I feel quite comfortable with the reports themselves. I think they're quite defendable. I'm happy with the overall result, and I'm happy with the sales. So I have no qualms themselves with the report. I think they're, as I said, very transparent, open, and very thorough. And the fact that the owners, I think that's great. The fact that the owners called me back, and that was great. I left messages and they all phoned me back. So I thought that was great. Hopefully I had some good dialogue with them. They're quite friendly. So yeah, so to answer your question, we have extensive experience doing it, and they vary in terms of complexity. And in terms of going to court, probably on one hand, I can count the amount of times that it actually proceeded to that stage, and oftentimes it's settled, prior to that.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. Any other questions? Councillor Payne?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Francis. Nigel, I'd like to go back to the injurious affection piece again. I think the factors that you mentioned were use and value. That those were two factors that are considered in the injurious affection. And would the use include the way, the personal use of that space, the space under consideration?
Injurious affection is, so just to give a quick on for injurious affection, which is, you're right, it's one of the heads of claim within the act. It would be market value. Injurious affection would be the second one, and that's usually obviously the one that people not care about the most, but certainly something that people put the most weight on, because really what we're saying is, how does this impact the remaining property, what's left? So in considering that, yeah, there's all kinds of factors that go into it, and I'll be honest, there's some that we just don't know until we know, the drainage issues, until we know, how many trees perhaps are removed, or long-term things. There's some things we just don't know, and so that's so some, we can only do our best that we can for the report itself, and we could put ourselves, down the road to say, is there any drainage issues, that kind of thing. But there's some things we just don't know. And so perhaps somebody would have a claim down the road for runoff, and hopefully they would work with the town in terms of installing a culvert. Hopefully that's part of the design process. It typically is. And as far as trees being removed and impacting, anything that the person had planted, certainly that's something that we would like to quantify, but a lot of times you really can't until it actually happens. So you do your best for those things. At the end of the day, the properties themselves, really what we'd be looking for, the typical scenario would be, if I'm downtown and I have parking out front and we're doing expropriation and we're taking the parking lot, and what impact does that have on my customers, my business, and things like that? That would be the severe injurious affection. Or if you have a farming property and you're doing a fee simple interest and you're taking a road through the middle of the property, that causes all kinds of issues in terms of gaining access to the other side of the road, in terms of farming equipment. Perhaps you have a younger son who doesn't have a license, and he uses the farm equipment on his property. So those are the kind of things that we would typically look at. And certainly these ones, I didn't get any of that from these ones. It was the biggest thing that came out of it was, access is not an issue because you can still access it. You can still go over it. Yes, you do, and you don't enjoy that piece of the property itself as much, perhaps, because there's an easement on it. But that's reflected in the value. That's really what we're doing when we put market value on there. So the fact that I can't use that property the same as I did before, really that's accounted for in the market value of the easement itself. That's essentially what you're buying. You're buying a partial interest in that easement, and the person is essentially foregoing, a part of the use of that property for the easement itself. But in terms of access, that's usually a big one that I don't see that being an issue here because they can access it, go over it, and there's really nothing to the south of it anyway. You're really into land that's, I wouldn't say non-accessible, but taking a walk down there, it's quite hard to walk over the wetland area to the rear, and so there's really no loss in value, and they could even access it anyway if they wanted to, and across the easement itself.
Yeah, thank you. So to be more specific, in terms of personal use and enjoyment of that specific piece of land.
Yeah.
For example, if my children have, if my children have a tree house in that particular section of land, and that's going to be disrupted, and my family will lose that particular use and enjoyment of that particular piece of land. Does that factor into the injurious affection?
That would factor into, if it's located on the piece itself, that would factor into market value. Now, these ones are all unimproved properties with no improvements other than the RPS site, which has the gravel road itself. But the rest of them, as far as I understand, talking to the owners and the satellite images, are unimproved. But you're correct. If there's something on that property, say a greenhouse or I can imagine a elaborate tree house, they would certainly get compensation for that if it was on the piece itself, and that would be reflected in the value of that. Now, if there was a building that was to the south of a road that you could no longer access, and it was now cut off, that would form part of injurious affection. But that's not the case in this scenario, as there's no building south of it, and even if there were, they could still access it.
Thank you.
I just wanted to comment about the design of the road, just briefly, because it did come up there with respect to, as the road is being developed, if drainage issues occur, anything that was unexpected. So the town, through our Solar Garden project, has engaged Strom Engineering to do the engineering design on the road. Right now, they've done a preliminary design, and the details of the preliminary design have been shared with the property owners. And there has been some discussion with the property owners around some of those design features. So the preliminary design can't be finalized until some clearing of vegetation has been completed, which would help to finalize the design of the road, where culverts would be placed, that type of detail. And in that final design phase, after the easements have been acquired, the town will continue to work with the property owners. And, I'm sure, as we always would do, if after the road has been completed and engineering design and has been installed, an issue were to arise, it would obviously be the town's intention to address that issue. So we will have the opportunity to accommodate design concerns from the property owners as we move forward, but the easements do need to be in place before the cutting and the finalization of the design.
Okay. Any other questions in the room? Online? All good? Thank you, Nigel. Truly appreciate you being here.
Yes, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions, we'll move to the next one. Am I making assumptions that Paula and
They're there,
trying to?
and
Yes.
Paula and Trent, are you able to turn on your cameras?
Would you like to speak to this one too?
Sure, yeah, I will just briefly, just to
Yeah.
provide some context for viewers. Before the presenters get to introduce themselves, and they do have some slides, and I'm not sure how you want to share them, and maybe that's been discussed with Maureen already. But I did want to note that the town, along with our partner Municipal Electric Utilities in Nova Scotia, contracted BDR to do a rate study to look at our situation with respect to rates and the potential application to the Utility and Review Board. So we did actually already have a presentation on the general structure of the rate, how we prepare the rate study and how the application before the board works, from Paula and Trent at our most recent regular council meeting to give the public a general overview, and council had some preliminary questions. So we're jumping right past all of that, but I just thought it was worth noting that if anybody wanted to go back and watch the previous YouTube, they would be able to get the introduction to this. Also, the rate study document has been, the draft rate study document has been made public through the town's website. So again, if you're watching this and you want to go review the document for yourself, that can be found on the website. So this morning, what we're here to do is to dive into the actual numbers in the recommendation. Council obviously is in a position of some time sensitivity. So there would be a motion in order in this case, if council feels prepared to do that after hearing from our presenters. So all that being said, welcome Paula and Trent. Thanks so much for joining us yet again. And I know you have a short presentation. Do you want one of us to share that, or did you want to share that? Maybe more typing away about that.
I'm still getting a message that screen sharing is disabled.
Well, that's weird. You should be able to
You
share.
gotta have at least one technical issue per meeting.
Got to.
Don't know why that is, because you're set up to be able to share. All right. See if that makes a difference.
Let's try again. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna go with slideshow. Sharp.
Here we go.
Okay, why don't I kick off and then Trent can conclude? All right, Trent? Hello? Okay, we didn't address any numbers at all in our previous presentation to you, but you will have had a look at the documents that were sent around. We've calculated that basically for the calendar 2023, the Mahone Bay Electric Utility will be short over $700,000 by comparison with a reasonable level of net income. This table kind of breaks down where that's coming from. Internal costs, including the utilities, operating, maintenance, administrative costs, depreciation, interest, and reasonable net income would alone, if the cost of power had not changed, produced a rate increase of 6.4%. And in our opinion, this speaks very positively towards cost management in the utility, because they have not had since 2008 any increase to address these costs. The rest of the money, nearly $600,000, is coming from increases in the cost of purchased power. As we said before, this is a global problem of fuel prices. It's affecting all of Mahone Bay's potential suppliers, and as a result, new supply arrangements with NSPI will result in this change, $583,000 by comparison to the power bill for the current year. So that means out of an increase of 34.2%, power purchases account for 27.8%. Okay, I can trend, if you're okay, I'll do this one and you can do the others. What we're proposing here, we did a cost allocation study, which was explained a little bit previously. So that looks at what the costs are to serve each of the different customer classes, compares them with the revenue, and that's a basis for saying one class maybe contributes a little too much and another too little. So we looked over the results of that. All of the classes except the street lighting and yard lighting are very close to where they should be. Yard lighting over contributes. So we're going to recommend a 0 increase to them. Most of their rates, or a great deal of it, is for the rental component of the cost as opposed to power consumption. So it doesn't, and it's small, so it doesn't make that much difference to the other classes. And the recommendation is to then increase the rates to all the metered classes and street lighting by an equal amount. So everybody shares equally in the responsibility for these cost increases. It's possible when the UARB looks at this that they might require us to make some adjustments, but we're going to start here. We think this is a fair proposal, especially in view of how large the increase is, and if there's reason to make adjustments relative one class to another next year or the year after that, it would probably be more reasonable to look after it then. Okay. Trent, can you hear me? Trent, are you muted?
Not showing is muted, but he's not coming through on audio.
Ah, all right, I'll have to go for it then until we hear him speak up. This slide is to, I guess, focus your attention as council on what needs to happen next and what decisions need to be made. So the first item to emphasize is the need immediately, within basically the next day or two if possible, to be able to submit Mahone Bay's application to the UARB and get their wheels turning so that it's possible to have the new rates effective when the new purchase power rates start to apply to consumption. If we find anything that can or we'd like to have changed, we can resubmit a change once we've made the application or at the hearing itself. In addition to giving authority to Dylan to submit the application, you may choose to direct staff to do some other things. One is to look at ways to phase in the increase rather than saying, okay, it's 34 effective in January. This would involve some either negotiation with suppliers or financing in order to delay increases. Although, judging from what the press said yesterday about government action on these increases, we might be facing a different situation, which would be easier to deal with on an immediate basis. You might want to ask for more information about effects on different customer classes, and ask staff to investigate potential other options to help customers who have high bills and are in need. And if conditions change or as time goes on, the utility can always make a further or different application to the UARB immediately next year, the year after, whatever time frame is necessary to do that.
I'm just gonna, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay, Paul, you keep going because we're almost done now anyway, I think.
yeah,
but-
this is
Yeah.
the last slide. So what needs to happen immediately? If you, as council, ask for any changes in the documents received, we will make them right away and prepare the schedules for filing. File them through an email and cover letter to the UARB. In order to do that, it's necessary for council to pass a motion to approve the rate study. And once the motion is filed, an affidavit will be sworn saying council approved the motion, and that will go with this material to the UARB saying the decision makers approve this and stand behind it. As soon as possible, it would be good to have strategy for communicating. And in addition, the UARB will require a notice of the application and the amount of the increase to be sent out or posted to notify people in the community. In the next few weeks, the UARB will send a series of emails with instructions as to what to do, what to post, when the hearing will take place, and so on. And between now and hopefully January, when we have an approval, staff will continue to update council on what's happening and what, if anything, can be done to mitigate the increase. So that concludes our presentation, and we're ready to respond to any questions you have.
Thank you, Paula. Councillor Finney.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I had a chance to review the BDR document at length, as well as the accompanying financial projections. I think it's, fairly self-explanatory in the sense that as a council, we've been talking about this trend for some time. I think the 2022-23 budget kind of clearly indicates that we have a significant shortfall and operating deficit this year based on higher costs and the fact that we haven't increased rates in 15 years. At this point, I think it's no surprise that the numbers are really challenging, and I think it's in our best interest to move this along in a timely way. I would move that council council approve the rate study and direct the CAO to submit the rate study to the URAB for adjudication.
Are you seconding?
I'm not seconding it, but I would like to, may I interject to ask if we could have the opportunity to ask questions before we get to the motion?
Well, I guess I'll move to the mover.
Sure.
Okay.
By this guide.
So just procedurally then, is that?
I'll withdraw.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So you have a question, Councillor?
I do, thank you.
Okay.
As a councillor and as a citizen, I find the prospect of a 34% increase awe-inspiring and challenging in so many ways. And I know that you have stressed the idea of communicating why this 34% increase has evolved. Is there any implication that there has been any lack of attention to managing the utility, or any lack of fiduciary responsibility in the past years to get us to this position? I'm thinking partly that residents may say 34%, well, that's so different from what NSPI is asking. So I'm just throwing these things out there as from my councillor position, and reflecting concerns that may arise from citizens.
Okay, that's a big question. I don't know, Dylan, whether you want to say anything, but as outsiders, first of all, in terms of the operating and internal cost, an increase of 6% over so many years, I think speaks very, very well to cost control internally. We know that Mahone Bay shares equipment and staff with another utility in order to make sure that there are qualified people to do particularly the field jobs at a cost that's manageable for a utility of such small size, and that on the administrative side, being able to use the resources of the town is also a very significant cost sharing and cost control measure. So internally, I would say we haven't done a productivity audit or anything like that, but on the face of those pieces of evidence, I would say that everything is being done to use resources wisely on an internal basis. In terms of the cost of power, you probably all know that the power contracts are negotiated jointly with other utilities through AREA, and that for years this has been highly advantageous and allowed Mahone Bay to keep rates very, very reasonable, and in some cases below NSPI rates for comparable classes, in part without having done any comparison. I would guess that we're making a jump to NSPI rates now off a platform that was perhaps a little lower, but AREA has told us that they negotiated widely for new power contracts, and that the power arrangements with supply from NSPI for next year was in a number of respects the very best that they could do for all the area participants.
And just to add to that, as far as prudency of supply, I think it shows the fact that you are getting some supply from Area Wind, which is cheaper than the cost of the other supply from NSPI. It shows that was a prudent decision when you embarked on that in the past, because that's helping to reduce the cost of power now.
Thank you. If you don't mind me asking, are you able to stop your sharing of your video?
Yes. No one has any reference to the slides. I'll do that right now.
Oh, good enough.
Would you mind me adding to that last comment as well, just because it was Paula suggested at the beginning that I should. So I just wanted to note, in addition to what Paula mentioned, so very correct that we haven't had an increase in operating costs in 15 years. Obviously, operating costs, have therefore increased 6% in 15 years. That's quite a bit less than the rate of inflation. And operating costs obviously do include staffing costs. So that's a testament to the cost sharing that we've been able to do with the Riverport Electric Light Commissions. So I certainly agree that this is not a rate increase being driven by internal costs. And then also I just wanted to note that in terms of internal capital costs, there are some, and though I say still not larger than you'd expect for a utility of our size, these have mostly been in relation to load growth. So that's a positive investment in the system, and our community continues to grow. People use more electricity. We hope to see more people convert away from fossil fuels. We did do a rate load analysis last year on our grid and have made some investments in the grid to accommodate future growth, and that will be continuing. And other than that, the capital this mostly relates to the scheduled replacement of transformers, which is required by federal legislation. So there are contributing factors within that 6%, but I think very modest for a utility of our size.
I have a question, which I'm not sure whether it's the CEO or Paul and Trent who can answer that. But in relation to one of the slides mentions council exploring ways to phase in costs or increases. And in my understanding in past conversations is that as a utility, we do not have the capacity to be able to do that. Would I be wrong in saying that? Or is it a case that we can actually explore that? Not on a taxpayer's basis, but the utility can actually afford to do that.
No.
Paula, do you want to take this first or should I?
Okay. Assuming that the government does nothing to help here, because that's we saw something in the news yesterday that potentially they might. But if they don't, in order to mitigate the increase, you would have to get funding from somewhere so that you could pay the power bill and delay passing the increase on. So that would mean some debt. There is none currently. So if legislation and regulations would allow you to do that, it is possible to do. And in our experience, where a utility defers collection of a cost, but the regulator has given in advance its consent to collect them later, that's kind of a collateral to the bank. They know you're a regulated business. They know that the UARB sets your rates, and that if they say you can get the money, you can get it. So these things are possible. As it's advantageous to ask the questions, and if you choose to go ahead, we'll support you by creating spreadsheets that say, okay, how much are you behind each year? How far out do we have to step up gradually in order not to give rate shocks to the customers? How much does it cost? And how long afterwards should it reasonably take to pay it down and make a plan? So it could be a shorter one with steeper increases and pay down sooner, or a longer one. And to a degree, that would depend on what happens in the future, whether there's another big increase, or whether in fact, if there's peace in Europe and a little more stability in the world, these rates would go back down and help that clear a little faster.
Thank you, Paula. That's something to add.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit to that. So I just wanted to note and totally agree with everything that Paula mentioned, but also that area mayors, so area alternative energy resource, alternative resource energy authority mayors, so that would be Mayor Davini here and the mayors of Berwick and Antigonish, have in the past couple of weeks here, knowing that not exactly what was going to be in the news, but knowing that there was an interest from the province in looking into the rate situation with NSPI and how that might affect us in turn. There has been a letter sent to the Premier's office and copied to our MLAs to just indicate that, the municipals also exist in this context. And, as they look to Nova Scotia Power, there are certain things that the province could do to assist the municipals through this, market situation. And we continue to be open to communication with the province in that regard. And also to note that area and municipal utility staff with the different units have done some exploration of possible smoothing measures with the board and with provincial staff on a preliminary basis. And further, that it's likely that the board will want to see that explored. So at this point, it's not included in our application, but it is likely that the board, especially if they hear from residents and businesses with concerns about rate shock, will want to see the utilities having explored that option. We are doing preliminary exploration of that option now. And then I just finally wanted to note, and Paula already noted this in her presentation, that there are also potential options to assist specific customers. So if the rate increase went ahead in full for the calendar year 2023, there may be options where specific customers experiencing hardship could receive, specific assistance. And there's some external assistance that we've been researching, because there's some charitable assistance out there in provincial programs, but there's also possibilities that we would have some type of deferral program in place ourselves for people who can demonstrate the, applicable criteria to participate. Staff would have to look into that more. But we did have a recent precedent with COVID, taxes that was permitted during that period. So yeah, those are all kind of contextual to the bigger question of what the province may determine to do.
Thank you. Councillor Finn.
So there's quite a bit of new information just disclosed that I think council has been unaware of, specifically around the concept of rate smoothing. And as you all know, I've been kind of on the record on a number of occasions talking about how fraught with danger that policy is, and how fundamentally unfair it is to rely on the backstopping, the financial backstopping of the taxpayer to subsidize electrical users, knowing that fundamentally our utility is not creditworthy unless it does receive the full rate increase, and therefore any debt that the utility would incur would have to be backstopped by the town. So these aren't surprises. This requirement for this rate increase is not coming out of the blue. We've been talking about it for at least 6 months. We approved a budget last July that ran an operating deficit this year that would exhaust our operating reserve within the utility. So the time has come to make adjustments to the rate. These are big numbers, but as the document clearly said, we've done everything within our power, within the costs that our town and our staff can influence to moderate the negative impact. The vast majority of this pain is coming from global dynamics, worldwide inflationary factors, and global commodity costs, all of which are not within the control of town staff or area staff. So in the short term, there's pain, but fundamentally around this table, I think the rate number is required. And even if we enjoy the full benefit of the rate increase, the utility will still only earn a 5% rate of return on its equity, on its asset base, which is far below, I think it's less than half of Nova Scotia Power. So, the days of the town enjoying a significant dividend from its utility have long since passed. We're essentially trying to run the utility on a break-even basis to try to meet our strategic plan. And the strategic plan says that we're trying to be competitive, but we're also get the benefit of having the scale and the synergies of the utility within the town umbrella, and it takes overhead and so on and so forth. So I think these costs are painful, but they're eminently fair and they're required. And I fundamentally don't believe that we should really spend a lot of time thinking about how we're going to have lower bills today so that the bills can be even higher for the people who live in town down the road. If you use it, you have to pay for it. Fundamentally, when you're a little town with a little bit of scale, and we have people moving into town, moving out of town, and businesses coming and businesses going, it's unfair, in my opinion, to have people pay less today so that future residents can pay more tomorrow. Anyway, you've heard my rant on that topic a number of times, but I do think that for this morning's meeting, we should really focus on the requirement to approve the rate study and to make sure that the rate study gets submitted to the URB in a timely manner, because we're only 10 weeks away from January 1st, and we need the rate increases by January 31st, or essentially the utilities insolvent really by July of next year with the cash burn that we would have. So it's the time of kind of worrying, debating about whether we need to ask for the rate increase is long since we're right up against the edge of the calendar, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commercial. Just to underline what Councillor Feeney says, my concern about fairness extends a little bit beyond the electrical utility, because nobody, to my knowledge, is doing anything about the fact that heating bills for the 50-some% of the people in town that use oil are going to roughly double this year, and that's just a simple fact. I'll go back to something I said a couple of meetings ago, and that is that there is one way that we can help mitigate this problem for everybody that would fit in with various strategic goals, fit in with our goals, and cost very little, and that's to really ramp up the home program, which allows for putting in heat pumps in residential residences that would cut the cost of electricity for heat by a third. It would also cut the cost of heating by oil by a third. We chose to go that way. And we could do it with a zero interest rate program, and we could do it relatively quickly, I would say.
Yeah, no, I think I just wanted to say that it would be totally in order to direct a, investigation of that option, presumably following a motion on the rate. It doesn't all have to be in one motion.
Yeah.
And I think Paula noted that earlier. There may be other things the council would like to direct in addition, is like exploration of assistance or deferral options and that type of thing. So it would be absolutely in order to provide that type of direction today as well.
So be fair enough to move the motion now so that we can vote on that and then talk about any other things. You ready to move now?
Sure. So I think maybe we'll just break it up into small motions.
Yes.
So I'd like to move the council accept the rate study.
Second. Second, Councillor Wilson. All in favor?
I'd like to move that the
Aye.
CA.
Motion carried.
Sorry, dude.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'd like to move the council direct the CAO to submit the rate study to the URB for review.
Do you have a second for that motion?
Second.
Councillor Carver? I'm calling you Penny again. On the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried.
I'd like to move that council direct staff to craft a press release outlining council's intent to make the submission to the URB and provide some rationale for why the submission's required.
Do you have a second of that motion?
Second that.
Councillor Carver? On the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried.
Be harder for David to do this in a convertible.
Yeah. He's doing great. Any other questions or thoughts on the issue?
What about the Dylan's
Assistance.
suggestion around various opportunities to assist?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I would like to move that council direct staff to investigate a rapid ramp up of the home program for installing mini heat pumps issue thing. You can word that properly, I hope. With a view to making that available to all of the taxpayers in the town and all of the people who use utility services as well. As quickly as possible.
Councillor Carver? On the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. Did you miss anything, CAO? Paul?
The only one would just be if, and again, I'm not trying to put words in council's mouth, but just if there's a desire to have staff investigate options for assisting individual ratepayers who may be experiencing hardship in the coming year as a result of the rate increase.
What's your wish, Councillor?
So moved.
Yeah. Second, Councillor Carver, moved by Councillor Phoenix.
I just ask a
On the
question?
question,
Can I just ask if that can be extended to folks who are having similar difficulties because of the price of heating fuel and the like?
Mover and seconder, I'm sure you can, yeah.
So in the event that, so can I just, so I paid $1.92 for oil on Thursday. Last year it was $1.12. So so I absolutely understand the increase of the 80%. I just, how would the town offset that pain? I'm wondering, like, what would be our scheme to do that?
Well, I don't have any answers. I'm just supposed to investigate. That's why I said it was in order. I'm not trying to be false out there, but.
so my assumption is that that's what staff will investigate.
Okay.
Give us some options and we can sort
Fair,
of debate
fair.
and.
Fair enough. So we can be prepared to be disappointed. Fair enough.
Exactly.
Well, certainly we'll make that amendment.
Okay. As amended. Seconded?
Yes.
Okay. On the question, all in favor?
We can do something about, we
Motion's carried.
can do something with the price of bacon as well. Please do that.
We'll think about it. Well, thank you, Paula and Trent, for your presentation and your work.
Yeah, thanks
definitely
very
will be in
much.
touch. I'm sure staff will be in touch with you, working in the background to get the submission done. We appreciate your help.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, Dylan, this is excellent that we got this done by the end of October. I mean, considering that's a lot of work in 2 months, really.
Well, and as has been noted now, it remains to be seen how much the board can accommodate.
Of course.
But there has been a lot of preliminary conversation with the board to anticipate our application. So just before we move to the next agenda item, we've already circulated the draft press release. I did circulate it again with a couple of suggested amendments from council. And I just want to note the last thing I would suggest doing, because I don't have a lot of time to get something out, would be that we change or we amend it to include reference to the two motions that were made at the end, so that there would be some reference to the fact that council has directed staff to investigate a possible ramp up of the home program with a view to assisting residents in converting away from fossil fuels for heating. And also that council has directed staff to investigate possible options for ratepayers experiencing hardship in the coming year, including those heating with fossil fuels.
I'm wondering about, would it be possible also to include a reference to the video of today's meeting and discussion, because I think the information could be well appreciated by residents.
I did have a reference to the website, but we could just mention as well that there's a YouTube. Yep.
And my assumption is that the comments that Councillor Finney circulated by email have been taken on board and.
Yeah, and I did just send another version with those changes, but we're in the middle of the meeting, so forgive me for not
The draft press release denotes the kind of the blended increase being driven that was talked about in the BDR report, but the BDR report delineates between of the 34%, they break it out 6% and 29%. I think the 6% is really a compelling number. I mean, I don't know how any reasonable taxpayer could look at that driver and say that the town hasn't done everything within its power to moderate increases.
So it's the 6 and 27, like the internal, external.
Yes.
Split, yeah.
I think just in that paragraph that talks about the blended rate, the blended amount, that was the first time I saw the split with the BDR report, which I think really elegantly crafts the real story, which really comes back to, are you guys doing as much as you could, like what else can you do when power rates are up?
Yeah.
Nothing
Well,
we can do about.
There's already a reference to the past 15 years without an internal cost increase, so
Right.
we can put the percentages in there as well.
Thank you. Are we ready to move on to the next one? Thank you, folks. Great discussion. Plan Mahombe. We've had lots of back and forth on email around the Plan Mahombe steering team process, and do you have any? Yes.
I would essentially, this is just on here because obviously it's a large group that the council appointed as the steering team, the PAC members, planning advisory committee members, and members of council. And there are consultants attached to this project, and there are staff, both with the town and with Chester, who all need to be assembled to have these conversations, and it's been quite challenging, and obviously no one wants to miss any. So the discussion this morning is about how do we schedule upcoming meetings of the steering team, and essentially staff sees there as being two options. We schedule for the date that the majority of people are able to attend, or we continue to defer meetings until the entirety of the membership are able to attend. So that's the question that we framed, but happy to hear any feedback about how to better get everyone in the room, because we do want to be able to move forward with this process.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I'm just curious what the number was of people able to attend on the November 7th date that was originally proposed. I'm just curious, out of the council and the full steering team, which includes council and the planning advisory committee.
Well, we did do a poll. I know Maureen has the details over there. I think the issue is that we have three categories: people who didn't respond, people who responded affirmatively, and people who responded to indicate they couldn't attend. And I believe 2 people responded to indicate they couldn't attend.
Yeah, well, and I'd like to change the narrative a little bit on that, in the sense that just thinking about this process, we've waited almost a year, right? We've delayed quite a bit to get to where we're at, and there's been questions in the background: what's happening, how come things are not moving? And so when we get to the step where we need to move forward, my perspective is that we actually need to put in the time we need to put in to get people at the table before we jump to the next step. Otherwise, we're basically, from my perspective, we're treating that steering team as a rubber stamp for what council wants, because council is the one that's delayed the process up until this place. And so in many ways, I would urge us not to jump quickly to say, well, it's all about numbers. If we ask for people to attend and you're not available, let's just move on to the next one. I would caution against that.
Sorry, if I may, before the discussion continues, just to clarify, Councillor Carver's question was about the availability of people for the, I believe you said the originally suggested date of November 7th. And as the CAO said, there are really 2 categories of questions. But just to clarify, the original suggestion was for earlier in November, which would have been the day that PAC would have normally been held. So that for that, and we had also suggested another day, November 3rd. Really, the availability was the same for all of them. So, and pretty much almost the same for categories of the 3 categories that the CAO noted, but there were a few dates that really it all added up to the same. And to the deputy mayor's point, the question was really those who were saying, what about the fact that everybody can attend? And that's where the question is. So I just want to clarify that it wasn't necessarily that particular date. It came up with others.
Yeah, I appreciate I am concerned about the non-responses, and I totally agree with the deputy mayor's points about having everybody at the table.
Yeah, and so my suggestion on this was and continues to be, let's poll for a time when we can actually get people to the table and give us. We're really late on this piece, right? And give us not a week or a month, and give us a little bit of time to say, well, when can we get people to the table? And if it's one person missing, maybe we can. And especially, my concern is the folks on the steering team that are not on council. I would love to get, if it was me who was missing, and the only person who was missing and the other folks in the community are available, I would say go ahead. But missing them, I think, in many ways, we're not. Having seen this process happen elsewhere, the same consultant with some results that I wouldn't want us to go there where the community is not very happy with the product. I would rather that we do all we need to do to get people on the same page, have a good narrative about whatever draft documents are going out before they actually go out, rather than not have that good narrative. If that sort of makes sense. So if council, if there's anything that's, I guess, pushing us to meet before November, maybe it's good for us to discuss that and figure out what exactly that is. But if we're okay with delaying to make sure that everybody's at the table and call people so that to make sure that they're available, I'd rather we did that because it can save us some headache down the road.
I'm gonna hand up on the thing.
Yes, yeah.
So it's really just a question of logistics. You know, we could put out a poll with any number of options. We could put out a poll for every date between here and Christmas. But what are the conditions that will trigger the meeting to go ahead? So if the poll is open for a period of time, we probably won't, we may not get all of the responses. I think we have to say that the poll can only be open for a period of time, and whoever has responded, those are the only people that staff are able to take into account in the scheduling of the meeting. And if the condition is that every person who responds affirmatively to a date, we'll pick the first date that every person who responds affirmatively to, if that seems reasonable. If there is a caveat that council members' responses are not necessary, we'll pick the first date that the majority of public members respond to, or that plus a quorum of council. So these are the conditions. We just need to, I know it seems like micromanagement, but I guess we're asking you guys to let us know these conditions so Maureen can just send out that poll.
If I may add another logistical issue, please keep in mind when making those decisions based on that, then what happens if, we had a period this past spring where people around this table got a lot of COVID went through this group. How many people do we need to then be sick, or, when do we cancel a meeting? And again, as the CAO said, it sounds like micromanaging, but we are at a point we'd really like to have some clarity about what we're sending out.
Without guidance, I would assume that a meeting would go ahead unless we lost quorum for the meeting, but that's council's position in that regard.
So another thought from my perspective on this, we already have a time and date set for a PAC meeting on a Tuesday in December. And all of these folks are members of the PAC.
But that was the case in November as well, and we did receive some responses from PAC members who were not available. And I guess to give them some out, the PAC only meets as required, so they may have gotten into a habit of not holding all of those days. I'm just saying we can't guarantee that everyone's available in December.
Councillor Feeney and then Councillor Cameron.
I'm still curious about numbers.
Oh,
Sorry, did you say Feeney first? Feeney first.
Let's make the brief point. I think, to your point, Dylan, like in the hierarchy of needs, I think at this next kickoff meeting, we need to maximize the community involvement from the community members first, like in our criteria. And then obviously councilors can kind of follow up as, we're expected to be apprised of where we are in the process. But I do think if we had to prioritize meeting dates, it should be prioritized around the non-council members to maximize that participation, at least for the first meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
I'm going back to numbers. How many community members do you have? Is it 5? And we have 5 members of council, is that right? So that's.
Well, we have for the steering team, the full council has been added to that, and then we have 4 members of council that are on PAC, and the steering team is made up of PAC and council. So we're looking at now 6 members of council and 4 members of the public.
7%.
Yeah, depending on when we hold the meeting.
Yeah.
6 or 7 members of council.
Yes.
Yeah, fair enough.
Plus,
Thank you.
we plus someone from the consulting company, of course, and then we've been working with the development officer and the senior planner.
Yeah, in setting the meeting time and in talking about the concerns now, in terms of the involvement, I think the focus is on the steering team, well, the breakdown of the members of council and the public members.
If I may though, it is very beneficial to have key staff people there because, for instance, the development officer can speak it to some of the questions that come up. Yeah.
Understood.
So are we clear about, I guess, prioritization? We're talking about prioritize when community members are available for this one step. So I would rather, let's not focus about what comes after, but this particular step after we've been away for that long, that we actually prioritize them being at the table. And then maybe secondly, council comes to that fore and then staff. Does that make sense?
Does.
Yeah.
Good.
I would like to vary that to say prioritize the public members, but also have a minimum number of council members.
Have to have enough council members for a quorum of council, would that be?
Something like
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then are we gonna go for the first date that meets these criteria or the date of the dates offered that has the best outcome? In the sense that let's just hypothetically say we might have a date where all of the public members can attend, we have a majority of council, but one member of council or a key staff person is missing. And another date where absolutely everyone can attend within the same window that we've offered. Do we go for the first date that meets those criteria or the best date that meets those criteria?
Best date from my
The best date.
from my perspective.
Then we just gotta narrow down the window, but I'm assuming it's up until the break over the holidays. I don't know if we're gonna go that far. Are we gonna offer that far? Or are we gonna cut off at some earlier date? I mean, the need for the meeting and, I would argue the need to have it sooner than later. Is that we will be providing Upland with direction that will help prepare for public engagement sessions in the new year. And it may be that after this meeting, it is determined that an additional meeting of the steering team is required before that direction can be provided. So not having the opportunity to schedule 2 meetings before Christmas, in the event that is required, would obviously push us into the new year if the steering team felt an additional meeting were required, which again, I don't want to prejudge where the committee is going to come down in that regard. So that's the challenge with having this meeting take place later in December.
Was it close to that?
Yes,
Yes.
please. I'm just wondering, there are a couple of issues to my mind. One is that the assumption that this is going to be a quick meeting to kind of go tick, 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 it's all good is I think highly suspect. So I suspect it's gonna be like 4, 5, 6 hours to get anything close to closure. So I'm wondering if there's any value, and I'll step back, so when we throw stuff at me, considering a Saturday.
Suggested a Saturday.
Yeah, I think
The
that
poll would include Saturdays within whatever window we look at.
But it's just a thought. I think it's an all-day affair, really.
I mean, I can't say what the consultants or staff ability to attend on a Saturday will be, but including them in the poll still does offer that opportunity.
Yeah.
And if we're looking at polling only Saturdays, then we better talk to the consultants and staff first, because they may not be available on any Saturday.
where
I was gonna make the same observation, having looked at a quick look at the material that we've been given. I think we're probably looking at a minimum of a day-long session. And if you can't find 1 2-hour piece when the people are available, you're not gonna find 3 or 4 in next month. I think it's far more preferable to do it for 1 day and have it as the focus for the entire group for that day. And even then, we may have to have, a follow-up piece before it goes to the public.
so are we sort of saying that rather than even focus on finding those 2 hours, let's focus on finding a Saturday that can give us at least 3 or 4 hours?
Or however long it takes to get it done, to get it accelerated to the point where we can be on that timeline.
So I guess just a question for council members, and obviously the public may have different considerations, some of them may not be able to attend on a weekday, but is the assumption from council members that you could only attend a half day or a longer session on a Saturday? Is that what we're given to understand? In terms of putting dates out there?
Oh, well, if I may speak for myself, obviously I can sit down for a day anytime, any day, but that's certainly not true of everyone.
Because we did say that the majority of council members would be the minimum, whereas the entire public membership would be the requirement. So if there was a weekday when the public membership felt they could attend, and maybe 1 or 2 members of council didn't, I presume we would be able to go ahead on a weekday. I'm just trying to hedge our bets, because if council only wants to consider Saturdays, let us know. We'll have to run it by the consultants and staff, but
I mean, in my mind, Dylan, I think the takeaway from the conversation is that let's not focus on a 2-hour meeting that starts at 7 o'clock at night when it's pitch black at 4:30 in the afternoon and everybody's exhausted. Let's figure out the best way to facilitate a really productive discussion to truly re-engage on the topic and accelerate and move it along. I do think there's kind of a collective agreement that that's probably a start at 9 o'clock and go to mid-afternoon type of a program, with appropriate structured breaks and a lot of coffee. So whether that can take place on a Friday or a Monday or a Saturday, depending on the availability of the whole extended team. I mean, I think it would be preferable to have staff work on Monday to Friday. If council can't make it there, then maybe we have 1 or 2 of us can only come for half the day. Maybe somebody can't come at all. But I do think that somewhere in there is the right solution, but you won't know that until we kind of canvass the entire contingent of people and find out what the options are. I mean, personally, given the amount of non-9 to 5 hours that staff puts into the day-to-day, I think we would all try to do this in normal working hours if possible. But again, if not, a Saturday might work too.
Councillor Carver?
Thank you. Actually, the image I was developing was of starting with a 2-hour or 2.5-hour session, and anticipating that we will need another 3 or 4 hour session, and then work from there. And that might be something to discuss with the consultants in terms of how they see the discussion unfolding. But that's just intuitively, and seeing that could be a way of doing it. Start with a shorter meeting and plan for a longer meeting. And include a Saturday in the doodle poll offers. Yeah.
And then I would just make the observation, when we did our strategic plan, if you recall, we met at the Legion from 9 until 4 and had lunch and coffee. And it was a very productive session. Yeah. And we did make use of the entire day to focus on the task at hand. And I think it would be a better opportunity, because this is such an important piece of policy for the town, that we have to give it the time that it needs to get done.
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe we need to do longer session rather than a number of shorter sessions. I think we'll accomplish a whole lot more in that 4-hour session than we would in, say, even 3 2-hour sessions. So I think if we can schedule longer sessions, we're better off.
So just sensing that if there's some consensus in the room, we want a longer session rather than shorter session. So in terms of giving guidance to staff, is look for a longer time, any day of the week other than Sunday, I guess. And let's see what we get from that.
Any day?
Yeah. So I know I have restrictions on my end for Mondays to Wednesdays, but I'm the one who raised this concern. So if I have to miss, that's okay. That's fine. But I think it's important that the members of the community who've been part of this feel like they're part of a steering committee, and I think this will give them that. So if Mo wants to technically knock me out, she knows how to. But yeah, you have something to do.
No, and I know it seems very small, but it is the kind of thing that has come up. So going forward, what I'm hearing is that we are going to find a time that in which we can, in which all of the community members are available, that we have enough members of council for a quorum. We're going to look for a date that is maybe not a full day, but the better part of a day. And then probably looking at like a 9 to 4 kind of thing, I think is what I'm hearing. And that we're going to look at any day of the week other than a Sunday. But I'm not sure and I apologize if it was answered and I just missed it, but what happens if we get 2 members of the public call in sick and they can't make it? Like, what happens? Is it after we've set the date, then we're good to go? Or is it 1 member, 2 members, 3 of people are like, I'm sorry, I'm sick, I can't be there. What's the thing that we cancel and then reschedule?
I think that's life. We have to go ahead. I think,
Yeah.
It's regrettable, but we did our best.
And the
I think as
related-
long as we have those numbers within the initial, if somebody has to drop out at a later date, then we still have to go ahead, yes.
And the related question to that is like, Mo can leave this poll open for a period of time. If there are non-responses, I assume everyone's in agreement that we will not be able to offer any accommodation there. I mean,
I am concerned about the non-responses and why aren't people responding?
we don't really have any way to.
No, but is it going too far to be proactive, to follow up and say, you haven't responded, please respond? I mean, either with an email and or a phone call. I know it's babysitting in some way, but
I'm offering myself up to follow up. If somebody hasn't responded, just tell me and I'll follow up with them.
We don't want to put anyone on the spot, but the public
No.
members typically do respond.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
so
it's,
even if it's.
It's probably just
us,
you folks around the
yeah,
table who.
just- I'll follow up, because I raised the issue of participation, I'll follow up. I'll know how to have that conversation with Kelly. If it's on.
In fairness,
Does that
he
help?
usually responds within 5 minutes. I gotta say, he was a good one to use as an example because he's my star.
Give people a week maybe, or,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. Some good time to be able to respond.
And we're polling up to the Christmas break. Are we gonna try to restrict that to a just shorter period, or are we gonna give all of those dates? I mean, remember, we're now looking for a pretty substantial time commitment, so we may have to go 3 or 4 weeks out to start to get availability.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Any thoughts about that? Councillor, now you have a thought?
Yeah, I think we should give them a good amount of time into December, but cut off the time, say maybe the 3rd week of November for them to respond by. We can't
Oh,
let
yeah, no, I definitely want to cut off
No, no.
responses within a week
Within a
of putting
week,
the
yeah.
survey.
Yeah,
out.
exactly, but give them until say the middle of December for a date. Put the poll out for, say, the middle of December.
The Saturday, the 17th, would be the last date on the survey. Is that too late, or is that?
Fair enough.
You can go as far as Saturday the
Prefer-
10th, or you can go as far as.
That would work.
Saturday, the 10th is,
Yeah.
we should
Yeah.
give enough time so public engagement is starting in middle, late
It's
January.
supposed to take place in the new year, but it's at the discretion of the steering team, obviously.
I mean, I think the Saturday, the 10th as the,
As a date, as the last date.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Saturday.
So that gives us 3 Saturdays.
December.
December, I mean, November.
Yeah.
Actually, if you
Yeah.
wouldn't get 3 Saturdays, because Saturday, November 26th is the election, and I know that we have 1 member of the public who's going to be away the month of November. I'm not sure exactly what day that person's
So
back,
if we
but
know the 3rd is the first Saturday and you want to offer 3, you'd have to offer. as far
Okay,
as
well,
the
then fair
17th.
enough.
But you're not offering Saturdays alone. right?
No,
No.
we're not.
Yeah.
No.
The 3rd, the 10th.
It's just the last day of the survey will be a Saturday presumably.
Yeah.
I mean, this
Yeah.
is the same week.
Who wants the Christmas shop the week before Christmas on Saturday anyway?
Yeah.
Silver rate.
And some people will be planning for going away Christmas, whatever, so I think the 10th sounds like a good date to be the last possible day.
We were at a land use bylaw meeting all day Saturday. Little piece.
So where did we
Copy
end
of
on
the
that?
polls.
Richard was still saying he thought the 10th should be.
17th, I think we agree that 17th is okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to do 3 weeks,
Yeah.
Dylan, then fine. but-
What was that?
okay, so we're looking at Saturday, December the 10th, and Saturday,
17th.
December the 3rd, and then,
17th.
and the 17th, okay.
And you're just not gonna start the poll until after the date when you already know that one of the members of the public isn't
Yeah.
available?
Yeah, I'll
So
have
it's
to
from
follow
November
up.
27th through to December 17th.
Fair enough.
That's the polling period. 1 week to respond.
Yes.
Think we've got it. Steph, we'll find out the consultant isn't available for 7 hours.
Of
I'm
course.
sure he'll be able to accommodate us. We'll see what happens.
Yes, we've agreed on the potential dates. Now we'll try to get agreement.
The real
on
date,
next
yeah.
one.
Real date.
Fair enough. Any other thoughts on that? We're coming to the end of our agenda. We have folks listening at home.
We do. We have 6 people watching at home. We have one question that I've been working on in the background. Does BDR have a company website? Where could we find more information? In the meantime, I've been doing some background work and I found actually their website just crashed, but I have a PDF brochure of theirs. So I will find a way to share that.
So,
like I said,
so
scrambling in the background.
staff will be posting BDR's information on.
Yeah, I'm not sure the best place to post that information. It might just be to attach it to this meeting package. I
Yes.
haven't gotten that far yet.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the BDR slides. Well, no, you get the rate study in the package. The slides, they were just a bit.
So that
you
may be
can
the
put
best
it in
way to,
behind the rate study, something like that.
Yeah.
yeah, because that would be, I would think
People
the
looking
best.
for one would be presumably the people looking for the other.
Yeah, that's a first thought, but it seems to make sense, but
I don't remember what amount of company profiles in the rate study document, probably not much, so that's not a bad idea.
And the other option could be to actually put it into that as a chat.
yeah,
Yeah, if there's an online hosted place you can link it to, then
Yeah.
yeah.
work on
Yeah,
that.
thank you. Any other questions from the members of the public would be appreciated. We'll give them a couple of minutes and then,
Sure.
yeah.
And in the
We
meantime,
do
I have-
have an in-person gallery.
Do you have any questions for us?
We're so used to being online that, you know.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how we develop the bacon subsidy.
top priority.
But I think we have a consultant. Councillor Feeney,
Pardon me?
for the bacon subsidy.
Oh, yes, exactly. Well, add butter to the list too. Doing that.
Certainly.
We'll look for, we'll look for a pig farmer to help us out with that one.
Oh, it's tough. Stuff.
Try being on a gluten-free diet and going into the store.
International gluten costs are skyrocketing.
Go.
That's a-
Exactly, Edgar, but thank you for coming.
See ya.
Thank you.
Still no questions, I guess?
Still no more questions on the, let me just take a quick look at, I'll just keep pushing Ashley to the
That's okay, I'm on wheels.
just to see if something's coming in faster than the lag. No, those are all the questions we have.
Thank you very much, folks listening at home and council. I'm glad we were able to finish that agenda in
Before 11.
before 11. That's, I'm grateful. A gift of time. Move
For German.
for John. Councillor Feeney, seconded by Councillor Carver. All in favor? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Forwarding stuff.
Second